Okay, welcome to another episode of the Footwear Intern podcast. Today we've got Tanner here. Super excited, Tanner, to hear your story, to share it with the people. You've kind of developed a really cool niche for yourself within the footwear space. So I'm excited to um, for you to share some of that and some of your 3D animation and design work. But if you're new to the Footwear Intern podcast, this is a podcast sharing individuals' experiences, getting into moving throughout and having a career within the footwear industry. So meant to help people looking at similar career paths, or people within the industry just to hear others' stories and their experiences. So Tanner,
Oh,
I'm super excited to have you here on the podcast today.
yeah, thanks for
Um,
having me.
yeah, so welcome. It's a pretty big deal. It's kind of like one of the biggest podcasts in the footwear industry. No, I'm just messing.
I
But
believe it.
I think I think it's fun, and I'm sure after sharing today, you'll get people that will reach out asking you questions. So
Cool.
I just to start, I'd love to hear like a little intro on yourself, and maybe some of your background prior to like jumping into what you're doing career wise.
Yeah. Yeah, so I I actually started with a my career kind of started in graphic design. That's what I went to school for. At Utah State, I studied graphic design. That was kind of the plan. I grew up um always enjoying art and drawing and stuff like that, but I I can't remember if it was parents or teachers or whoever, but like it always seemed to be like a very impractical career path to stay in art. And
Yeah.
so I never really thought of it as like a career option. Um, so when I got to college, it kind of took me a minute to figure out like what I was doing. I kind of stepped into a couple different areas and nothing really felt right until someone mentioned graphic design and I had never even heard of that before. So,
Yeah.
but that felt like the perfect merge to me of like a practical application of art. And so that's kind of, so I got into graphic design, had a really good group of people in my year. And yeah, I I started, um, I had a graphic design position while I was in school, but it was just at a local company that I wasn't necessarily interested in staying with. I wanted to try something more, something bigger. So I actually aimed for sports design in the beginning,
Cool.
and um, yeah, I remember applying for a bunch of jobs as I got closer to graduating, some internships and stuff, and I found one, and I think, as far as I remember, it was on just like an Indeed uh, job listing, but it was for an internship with the Orlando Magic. And so I applied for that, got an interview. They like, I remember them sending an email saying like, this internship is for, I think it was 8.25 an hour or 8.15 hours, like minimum wage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're like, "Are you okay with this?" I was like, "Well, I mean, sure, I guess." So anyway, I got the internship, moved out to Florida, worked in for the Magic in the NBA, and it was cool. But I remember thinking like, this is um, this is just a job. Like, it's still a company that has to make money. There's still a bunch of not cool things that I need to do. So that was kind of my first rude awakening to uh, the real world and how it's not just like make cool stuff all the time. Like you gotta actually,
Sunshine and rainbows, right?
yeah, exactly. So, so yeah, we moved out to Florida for a little bit, but so I married, um, had one kid at the time, and we were kind of just feeling like we needed to move a little back a little closer to home. So I found a job with an agency in Salt Lake City, and we moved back to Utah, and was there for a little bit, and then a position came open at the Utah Jazz, and so I got job there. Then COVID hit, and the NBA and the whole world shut down. So um, we moved back up to Logan and um, got a few jobs after that doing like same graphic design stuff. But I started looking to I can't remember specifically what it was, but I got super interested in motion design and 3D. I actually remember um, years before that when I was going to school, um, one of my classmates asked our professor about 3D and Cinema 4D, and I didn't know anything about it, and so he kind of showed us like what the capabilities were. I just saw some cool 3D things. I was like, man, like that's unreal that you can make something that looks real in a digital space. Just blew my mind. So that kind of like stayed in the back of my mind as I started my career in design. And but Cinema 40 was like, it's a couple grand a year or something, and I was like, you know, making 8.25 an hour to start with,
Right. Yeah, that
like
that
things
doesn't
like
work
that.
out.
Like, yeah, I'm like I can't afford this and pay for food and rent and stuff. So I kind of just kept it in the back of my mind until I somehow found the software Blender, and it was free and doing 3D. And so I was like, well, I mean, I can afford free, so we can try it out. And started just doing it on the side. The YouTube University, started learning. I was kind of like figuring out After Effects and Blender at the same time through YouTube videos.
Hmm.
After Effects was a little easier to digest, so I started down the like 2D animation path, and but was still like trying to figure out 3D at the
You're
same.
doing this all on your own at this point, right?
Yeah, so like graphic design during my day job, and which you can do motion design in a graphic design career, but I didn't, my position didn't need it or call for it. So I would just learn it on my own, like after kids went to bed and stuff, and
Yeah.
um, wanted to make cool projects, things that I could put in my portfolio, and maybe someday I'd be able to get a motion design job. So
Cool.
yeah, just started doing that on the side, and then eventually I one of my previous classmates had a connection to this small agency that was looking for like some stop motion work, and I mean I had never done it, but I knew the principles of like how it worked, and
Yeah.
so I told him I could help, and kind of just figured that out as I each month as they gave me new projects, I'd like, have to figure out how to do it. And um, I'm sure a lot of them weren't amazing, but it gave me like a good reason to like start putting in more reps and figuring out like how to do it all, and digging into like, before it was just, oh, I want to make something cool. Let's see what kind of tutorials are out there. And but then it started becoming like, oh, I need to actually figure out like how do I green screen this thing and how do I like put a sequence together, and like I had actual real world questions that I needed answers to. So it really started to help me figure out like what to search for and
Mm-hmm.
learning faster that way. So yeah, started doing that on the side, bringing in a little extra money, and then a another position opened up at a different company for a motion designer, and so I was like, well, I mean, I don't have a ton of experience, but this would be a perfect way to actually like be able to learn on the job instead of just on my own time.
Totally.
So, um, by some miracle, I got the job. They gave me a chance, and yeah, it was. I started learning a lot more. I was primarily, After Effects and 2D stuff, but it gave me like a solid 8 hours a day to be able to figure out how to do it. And so that really accelerated my growth and abilities that I was learning. And um, so as I was learning all of that on the job, this company also had a 3D team, and so I was able, and the 3D team, like a couple of them were using Blender.
Yeah.
So I was able to like
Is this
talk
an
with
agency that
people.
you're at? Is the
No, it was in-house.
Okay.
It's a company called Maloof. They did
Yeah,
like
yeah.
sheets and bedding and stuff like that. And so I was able to like talk with the 3D people and like get more like, because I mean, I didn't know anyone that did 3D at that point, and so figuring out like any tips that they had or suggestions, and still was like, as I was learning more After Effects, I was realizing that I really wanted to be in 3D.
Mm.
And so like luckily motion design is applicable both to 2D and 3D. It's just what space you're in. So um, as I was doing my day job, still wanting to make like to get into 3D space, and so I still doing personal projects, things that I thought might be cool, and most of it probably wasn't. But I I remember seeing on LinkedIn um, some hype about this local shoe company in Utah called Kizik, and I had never heard of it, and I think it was fairly new still, like just a couple years old, and so it's like, oh man, that'd be kind of cool to do a 3D shoe animation project, and so I reached out to one of the he was a creative director at the time, Blake. He was on LinkedIn, and so I reached out to him. Was like, hey, if you ever want to do like freelance, like a 3D animation, I'd love to like do a freelance project for you guys and see if I can help out. And so we started talking, and it kind of like didn't turn into anything for a little while. I think that was like beginning of the year we had a conversation, and then I think they had a position open or something for a graphic designer later in the year. So I reached out again, and I was like, okay, I updated my portfolio. I put more like more 3D stuff in there, and if you ever need like want to do some 3D stuff, let me know. And he was like, well, how about a full-time job? So we started talking, and just worked out. Like they created a position for me to do motion design, and um, brought me on in-house to figure out how to do motion with shoes. And so that's kind of like in the end how I got to footwear space.
Yeah.
Was like, I mean, mostly just luck, but I
Sounds
did.
like a lot of hard work too. Can't deny that.
Yeah, I tried to build up my portfolio. I did, I downloaded a 3D model of some Nike shoe, like I think in the in between of like when I started talking to Kizik and like when I actually got hired, I found a shoe model and I made my own little like spec ad for a Nike shoe. And again, it wasn't amazing, but at least I think it showed them that like I could do something, and must have not been like so bad that they were like repelled by that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that helped. But yeah, I was at Kizik for a couple of years. Now I'm full-time freelance doing 3D for a lot of different companies, but definitely still enjoy the footwear space and talking to a couple other brands right now about hopefully doing some more 3D stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. The I have a bunch of questions or points along the way of what you were sharing. But well, I guess one thing just uh, of recency of you telling that story, it sounds like I mean you stayed within like the graphic design space generally, right? And there was the um you moved into motion that could be 2D or 3D. Um, and then learning the 3D. I mean, it seems like a lot of, at least to what you're doing right now for your career, was learned after school. And I think that, so a couple of things I'd want to ask or dig into there, but I feel like a lot of people that I talk to about like just getting into like the footwear space in general are like, oh, do I need like a degree from a specific place, or do I need to or specific skills or different things like that? Would you say this? I guess like two part, but was there anything like, and not to like cast aside what you learned in school, but were there like core principles or anything that you learned from your college degree that was ingrained in like the learning that you did outside of it, or was all the learning that you did outside not as much related to the degree? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Um, I'll say like a lot of what I do now doesn't have to do with what I learned in school, but I think I'm really glad that I still did school because of like the design principles that I learned,
Yeah.
and like because those will translate to, I mean, even things outside of the design world, like principles are pretty universal. But I mean, beyond that, I think I also was given a better, like, I think my design taste was a lot higher when I left school as opposed to when I went into school. And I think if I were to have skipped that part, that maybe I just like wouldn't be um I don't want to sound like snobby, but like I think there's a certain design aesthetic that people like, and
Yeah.
the better you can be at that side of it, that craft, even if you're not good at it currently, but you know where you're aiming for, like you'll close the gap eventually. And so I think that's what it was for me. It was like I was exposed to a lot of really good design, and so that helped me realize like kind of the difference on really high quality and lower quality stuff, so that knowing where I want to be is here, where I am is here, but I know at least the principles of like what they're doing here, so I can keep practicing, keep like figuring out how they got here so that I could get to that point. So although what I do now is nothing that I learned in school, there's still like a ton of principles, and like even just learning how to learn is a big part of like what I still do.
Totally. I mean, it sounds like it kind of like laid the foundation, right,
Yeah.
um for your design background, and you just built from it. So I think that's a great point. I think that like being able to um I don't know, yeah, it gives you a like a greater breadth of
Yeah.
knowledge, right?
Yeah, totally.
And then it's so far in your career, and it sounds like you've had opportunities to continue learning and continue to like dive into more specific things and then get out and go into something else.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, that's cool. What I think that learning outside, I guess learning outside of school where you're getting grades for it, and learning outside of getting paid for it. So like the your own like this stuff you're doing at night, like when kids are asleep or whatever, end of the day, is the hardest kind of learning.
Mm.
And this is just my opinion. I guess I don't get to decide what's hard or not, but that's the um. So I think that's really impressive that um that you took that time to do the personal projects, right? Where there isn't like the inherent like added to your degree or added to your work. Um, is that something like I guess you talked about how like you didn't pursue art as like a career path initially, or it wasn't something that you considered until you learned about graphic design. Like when you were growing up, was that something that you would just like to do, like your own projects or things, even if maybe it wasn't like the main thing?
Um, I I mean, growing up, I always loved just like drawing things, and so that was kind of just a hobby to try and I was trying to like replicate what something else was like take the back of like a VHS and like replicate the cartoon or whatever that was on it. But I mean, I'm past like being a kid. I even though I enjoyed being creative and I still did like art classes and stuff, like I consider myself like fairly lazy at the core. Like I
Oh
didn't
man, I don't. You might just be tearing yourself down a little bit. It doesn't sound like it.
But so like for a long time I didn't do like any personal projects. I think um part of what was motivating to me and again this was like my process and from graduating school to like actually getting a motion design job or a 3D job was like years in the
Yeah.
making. It took a long time for me to like even feel comfortable in or even somewhat comfortable in any of those programs. But I think going to design school like um, portfolio was important to me, and I think I also was like, and I still am to a certain degree, like motivated by people's approval and like because my part of getting a job was people approving my portfolio and saying that my skills are good enough to
Yeah.
like join them. And so I think that's like a lot of designers, the good and the bad about being a designer is like everyone is critiquing your stuff, and you learn to deal with the critiques, and that's not what like at least for me, I'm not really bothered if people have critiques. It's is it like am I accepted because of my portfolio or not? And so a lot of me was driven by this need to be like I need to be a high quality designer. I need to be like at a specific level to for my former classmates to feel like I am as good as them, or for my professors to think that like I was successful, and or for my even my own family and friends to think that like, oh, what I'm doing is really cool. And like when I was at in the NBA, everyone thought it was super cool I was NBA, but like secretly I was like, it's really not like that different than any other job. It's just sure the content is a little different, but I mean, it's still a job. So I think there's this perception that people have and that designers have about each other and ourselves. And so for me, a lot of that motivation was to like build a really cool portfolio and be seen as like a good designer. And so um, for good and for bad, that's kind of what like a big motivator was for me is to like I wanted to make cool things that people thought were cool and they would hopefully hire me for. So I think that's okay to a certain extent. Like obviously everyone needs to make money and everyone and it's okay to like want to make cool things, but I think it is a struggle, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people to like be motivated by other people's expectations instead of our own.
Yeah.
And so it's a double-edged sword.
No, I think that that's really interesting and I resonated with it a lot. Like when you were saying you got the job at the Orlando Magic in my brain, I was like, oh, that's a cool job. And I didn't know that you would spend time in the NBA. But I'm a big jazz fan.
Yeah.
But I had that same realization as well. Not to make this about me, but like even just um, I had a couple like part-time footwear design jobs, and then getting my first like full-time at a company that wasn't contract anymore with Black Diamond. And I was like, oh, I've made it, And then you do it, and you're like, oh, this is a job. It's like like it still sucks, right? Is the like there's a yeah, I 100% can resonate with that because it is I don't, and obviously both of us have been in the design field for I mean predominantly in our careers and so hard to speak to another field, but it does feel like it's hard to be like I am Tanner, I am not a designer, like
Yeah.
I'm Doug, I'm more than like to equate like your personal worth with like
Yeah.
how cool this your job is or the stuff that you do because it's like what you're doing in design is like you're creating, right?
Yeah.
You're building things and then you're judged off what you're building and whether it's based off like aesthetic or sales or um clicks, whatever it is. But yeah, I know I totally resonate with that point. I think it's really interesting and something that I try to like to separate too. But
Yeah.
it's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
But Tanner, to give you some validation, maybe which I don't know if that's is or isn't what is helpful, but your work is really cool. So you've at least made it there.
Well, thank you. I I'm sure as it is with most designers, like looking at pretty much any previous work here, there's always like things that you cringe at,
Oh yeah.
things because obviously you're growing and you become better and but yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's still somewhat a motivator for me. As much as I don't necessarily want it to be, I still seek people's approval. And um, I think, and I don't know how other people's experiences were with like school or like pre any design job, but I feel like there's some sort of expectation or like, or maybe there's just not too many conversations about like what the reality is, but it felt like, oh, when I graduate and get a design job, like it's just gonna be like I'm only gonna be doing like really cool logos and like really cool branding stuff and like it I think again, not that it's a bad thing, but there's just a certain narrative that's talked about like what design is
Yeah.
and then when I got to corporate job, even agency stuff, I was like, oh, this is, I mean, 90% of this is not like super cool stuff. Sometimes some of the jobs lent themselves to more opportunities for cool creative exploration, but a lot of it was driven by sales and revenue and need to make money to employ people. So I'm sure, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but it felt like there was this expectation when I graduated, and then I like for a couple years I had a little rough patch of like this isn't the design career I was promised, and
Yeah.
then I think coming to terms a little bit with that and finding like better jobs and like growing it myself as a designer like so I think there were like a lot of different factors, but like I'm okay with it now. I
Yeah.
understand like the give and take, and there's a lot of opportunities for making cool things even inside of like um a tighter constraint that maybe doesn't feel as creative, but also like there's plenty of things I do that don't feel super creative that I'm not gonna put in my portfolio, but they still pay the bills. So
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I mean, I think that's a really good conversation point. That's the like just in I guess the more like product design side, I remember a lot of people saying like you work really hard to like because it was always like in just thinking of like shoe design is like you want to sketch like you want to have cool sketches, you want people to like your sketches, post them on
hmm
Instagram, and it was like you do all this hard work to like only do that for maybe like 5 to 10% of the year, is the
yeah,
but yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. So I guess what then was it just like getting out of the grunt jobs of like entry level stuff? And but I mean, like you said, like still you have to like there's grunt work and that's what pays too.
yeah.
Um, but or was it like moving into this animation space and that you enjoyed more? Or where did that like realization come to then actualization of like enjoying the design space more?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was multiple factors. Part of it was like um, just growing as a designer, growing out of like lower level positions. Looking back, I'm like, man, I was kind of, I mean, not to like the people I worked for or anything, but I was kind of whiny about the first jobs that I had. But I think a lot of that had to do with my expectation and not like the actual job. Like looking back, they were actually decent jobs, and I shouldn't have been complaining as much as I was. Um, but yeah, part of it was getting out of traditional graphic design. I love graphic design, but I kind of always felt a little out of place in graphic design. Mostly because there were so many good designers, and so many people that I went to school with that were like just killer designers, and I just felt like I was like not even on their level, and then like a lot of the design field, at least in graphic design, was it felt kind of elitist. Like there was, you know, the better designer you are, the like higher up in the hierarchy you are, and so I didn't love that. And not that it was intentional, but when I got into motion design in 3D, like the I realized that the community in motion and 3D is like way more just inviting and accepting of like people just starting out and people like super advanced, and so I really enjoyed. I didn't know that's what I would get when I kind of started getting into it, but it was a nice um, benefit to find a community that was like a lot more helpful and a lot less like, I don't know, I feel like part of the graphic design community was like, you know, you need to keep your secrets, your own secrets, so that because if I don't get the job, then someone else is going
You're
to
gonna
get
get the
the job.
job.
It's
Yeah.
like everyone was just competing for everything, and even though that's true to some extent, like it feels much more like an abundance mindset in motion and 3D, where people are like willing to share how they do things, and willing to, you know, I see on LinkedIn all the time, like people that need jobs are like reposting job opportunities for other uh, people in their same field to be able to apply to, or so I'm like, it just kind of blows my mind that people are a lot more like willing to share with the community in the motion space and 3D space.
I love that. Yeah, a community is huge. Yeah, the elitism and like in some of the design spaces is definitely a thing. And that I feel like especially when you're like entering the career force, and it's like where like everyone you go to school with is your friend, but it's also like you're gonna end up applying to the same jobs, and it's kind of
Yeah.
like this weird like thing to traverse.
Yeah.
But but yeah, then everyone kind of like siphons out into their own like silos of different areas in the career space. But I
Yeah.
remember even just thinking like seeing people apply to other places. I'm like, oh, do I need to apply there? You know, like is that that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I guess moving. So now you are where you're at. Could you and so with this, I'll post like some if you're fine with it, like some links to your website
Yeah.
and some of your work. But um, there are like a few things that are in my like LinkedIn like quick scroll that I'm like was that who knows why I actually need to do it, but it's like the what's interesting going on now on LinkedIn, you know?
Mhm.
And more often than not, I'm looking for like a sweet animation from Tanner. And some new design stuff like the I don't think you said it, but there was the crumble cookie. You didn't
Oh,
say crumble, but like I don't know, like different things that you've been working on. Um, could you I guess just talk to a little bit of like what it is you do or what like you talked about it with Kizik, but like I, I don't know. You are probably I mean I know 3D designers, but I don't know 3D designers that also mix it with animation as much.
mm.
So like what does your like work look like? A company's coming to you and they're like, "We want you to do something awesome." Do they? Is that it? Like then you have the freedom to say this is what's awesome, or
I wish.
what does it look like?
Yeah, no, so I primarily I work primarily with companies that produce physical products. So, obviously things like footwear, or I mean, I've done work for other companies that, whether, I mean, it doesn't matter necessarily the category that they're in, but if they're making a physical product, what I do is recreate that in the digital space, mostly for marketing purposes. So, for if it's something like shoes, I'll help with things like a new shoe launch. We'll make a 30-second animation for that. Or if there's even I've done some work for some companies that their product isn't even real yet. And so, but to whether that's to get like some buy-in from investors, or they're wanting to start some marketing stuff or get prepped for when they actually can start producing, then I can recreate it in the digital space, make it look hopefully real enough that people understand like what they're getting and or what they're buying into. And so it enables companies to be able to do a lot that is either not possible or very expensive and time consuming to do otherwise. So like part of I'm almost in like the photography and like video space now, like people that
Yeah.
are photographers or videographers. I'm just doing it digitally instead of physically. And so, um, it can make, whether it's animated or not, like a lot of ads and stuff so that people can buy, and we can speed up the process for doing that stuff. Because a lot of like, I mean, if you're doing a shoot physically, you have to, um, rent the space and have the equipment, and I mean, take the time. And if there's any mistakes, things that you need to change, like you'll have to go and redo it all. Where in my case, I can just make it once, and then if we need to change a color or do it for a different thing, like I don't have to set it up again. It's all just living in a digital space, and I just render a different colorway or whatever. And so there's a lot of advantages to doing 3D. It's not right for every company, but I think for a lot, especially in the product space, like it makes a lot of sense. You can show off features that maybe are typically harder to show off, things that like live inside of the product that you don't want to like cut your shoe in half to like show it off, but you can show off the same things in the digital space that people can still understand without having to do it physically.
That's yeah, I think it's really cool. I think you're in like a really interesting niche that, like you said, like time saving, ability to like edit, go back. Do you find yourself like also like directing it in a sense, like as far as um or do people usually have a vision, or are you like, this is what I've done and a lot of other things and it was really successful, or what?
Yeah. Yeah, so it kind of depends on the client. I've had um, a lot that they have an idea of what they want, and they kind of just need me to, be the hands and the tool to like get it done. And then I've had a lot that um, they they only know their product, but they don't really know how to sell it necessarily. And so um, I I've kind of done like either and a lot in between where um, and that's probably usually the most usual case for me is like I work with them, like
Mm.
they have some ideas, I have some ideas. The nice part is like they know their product really well and they've probably been marketing it for a while, so they kind of know some things that work and some things that don't. And then but I know the 3D and motion design space, and so I can bring some ideas of like ways to show off features that they probably wouldn't have thought of, and hopefully some of that is just like bring a more elevated experience that like I'm not typically working with, like Nike or these huge companies that already have tons of content. They already have like tons of designers that are doing really high quality stuff. Like a lot of companies that I work with haven't necessarily dipped their toes into 3D before, so they don't necessarily know what's possible and what's not. And so I kind of help educate them, and we both bring ideas and figure out like what that turns into.
Yeah. That it's really like I don't know, really really interesting, really like a fascinating career path and just like industry in general. I think it's really fun. Would you so you mentioned maybe to take it back a little bit. Like Orlando Magic was an Indeed post. You talked with uh some Kizik people via LinkedIn. Have the way that you've gotten your jobs and gotten to where you're at is most of it, I guess, is there a pattern or have there been a couple different methods that have been successful for you?
Um, I mean, yeah, I feel like I've kind of done a little bit of everything, like from something as basic as like a job site, Indeed, to then like um things like I started having a few more connections like as I got along in my career, and yeah, obviously the easiest way was when I just was talking to someone like
Yeah.
as a person, and not like hoping I would stand out within 100 other applications. So I would definitely like having a personality and a presence on social media is helpful to some extent so that like people can see um, that you're not just like another resume that came through.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, probably most of it was like job postings, but the further I got along, like the easier it was to find some connection, and like that definitely helped to at least get my foot in the door.
Right. Hmm. The um would you say just for like for your space now, is there a forum where most people connect? Like is it like Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit? Like is the what where like the you're the only 3D animation person in my social media scroll. Like is
Yeah.
where do you connect with other people?
Um, I think a majority are still like primarily on Instagram,
Okay.
but I've basically given up on Instagram. I am mostly LinkedIn now. And part of it is like what you're saying, like a lot of people on LinkedIn aren't posting like design work or motion work or whatever. And so what's nice is that like being in the space a little earlier helps me stand out more because most people they're connected to on there like probably just giving like their thought of the day and posting a selfie or whatever. And
Some
so,
sort of like AI generated
yeah,
post.
seriously. So for me, it's been really helpful to be on LinkedIn because I think, there are more and more like 3D and motion designers getting on, which is good. But for me, it's been helpful to be able to connect with people in marketing, like more high up marketing positions or what decision makers in companies to be able to like be like, oh, I haven't seen something like this before, like, but I want this for my product, and so that's really helped me connect with those kind of people, other designers too. But I've gotten like 90% of my um, clients are have been through LinkedIn,
Wow,
just from like posting work and the way that interactions and the algorithm works for like showing that to other people has been like super beneficial for me.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it was something that you liked, but it was like someone else, and it was like they were more in the like the film side of something, but it was like the Severance trailer. Uh,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's just like I was like, oh, that doesn't seem like something you would normally see on would normally see on LinkedIn. But
Yeah.
no, I think that's I mean, sounds like it's a great strategy because it really is like the most interesting stuff that you'd see on the feed is some cool like 3D work, and especially in this like I mean that's what you're doing, right? Is creating something that is digitally and obviously visually interesting to for companies,
Yeah.
but marketing yourself that way is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been super helpful for me. And um, so I would, if anyone's not on LinkedIn, like as any sort of designer, footwear or not, like I think it's a good space to start. And I mean, I think it takes a little while to gain some traction, but I mean, if you're putting out high quality stuff, people will notice and people wanna be connected to other like people that are doing really cool stuff. Like follower count and stuff like that doesn't necessarily matter. Because most of those people aren't going to buy from you. But if those people interacting with it can like maybe get that in front of other people in their network that may be buyers in the future, like
Yeah.
then I mean it does matter a little bit, but it's it's been really good for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. Would you, I guess, just to finish off, the for someone interested in like learning about your space or getting into your space or just I guess for anyone in general looking to get into a creative field or pivot within design, would you have any like closing advice for maybe it's a Tanner in his earlier life or just anyone in that kind of
Yeah.
in between life situation?
Yeah, I mean, I can only obviously speak to my own experience, and I don't think everyone's situation is the same. But I do think for me, like, I would say if you're not passionate about it enough to be doing it like on the side, like in your extra spare time, then like it's gonna fizzle out for you. Like every step, even as you like become better or get the new job or whatever, like whatever your goal is, once you achieve that, like there's the human condition is like you become used to it within like it's like 6 to 9 months or something like
Hmm.
um so there's got to be something more than like that position that's driving you. And again, like, not that it was a great motivator, but for me, like, I wanted to make a portfolio that was cool. And like, so I think people that are maybe just wanting to jump straight into it, might and aren't wanting to put in the extra work on the side, like at some point, even if you do get the job, like it's not going to be satisfying after, pretty short amount of time. So I would say like follow whatever you're passionate about, and obviously that can change and that can grow and develop just as you do. But like for me, being able to um, figure some things out on the side and like figure out like I really do actually enjoy 3D and I want to keep pursuing this even before I got any sort of job doing it, I think was really beneficial, especially, with how the economy ebbs and flows. Like, you never know if you're going to have what you're doing forever. And so if you've got income, like, keep it until you can, like, viably make a transition.
Yeah.
But obviously, there are different use cases for everyone. I think that like some people might just be good enough to just jump and they'll make it work, and then other people like that's not going to work for them. So, but for me, I think I can attribute a lot to doing personal projects and making a portfolio that of stuff that I want to be doing instead of like necessarily the stuff that I am doing, and
Yeah.
that was really helpful.
Cool. I, I think you have shown a lot of drive, even though you said that you're lazy, and
Still am.
doing like getting to that spot of some like doing something that you enjoy and something that's interesting and something that other people need. I've just kind of found like that golden nugget. Uh, but I love that. I think that not I think I know there's a lot of learnings that people will pull from this. And it's I mean selfishly I think it's just been really interesting to hear about your career and kind of process through it.
Mm.
So thank you, Tanner. Thanks for your
Yeah,
time. Thanks
yeah, of
for sharing your story.
course. Thanks for having me.
Um, and we could talk for a second, but that'll be the end of the podcast. So there will be a link below to some of Tanner's information, and um, send him like a million DMs because I'm sure he's got time for all the messages.
Do
Just
it.
kidding. But yeah, thanks for your time, Tanner, and thanks for anyone who listens.
Yeah, thanks.